Okay, hello and welcome to the 2021 Cal-ISBOA Annual Conference. You are in breakout session facilities Where to Put My Money, C19 Changes That Stick. I'm Andrea Marcus, the Membership Engagement Manager here at Cal-ISBOA, and I'm so pleased to introduce our presenters today. We have Kevin Folsom, Director of Special Projects, and Joe Rayburn, Director of Sales, both from Building Solutions. And with that, I will hand things over to Kevin and Joe.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you everybody for allowing us a chance to come talk to you today. I want to tell you a little bit about Building Solutions. Just to get started, most of you probably know who we are. We're celebrating our 30th year this year as a firm, and we are trusted advisors and chief advocates for independent schools all over the country. In fact, completed just over 1,500 different assignments for hundreds of schools in 39 states. So we know schools, and our bread and butter, probably where most of you know us, is either from our practice of providing facility audits for schools to help manage and better predict facilities and operations costs, or you may know us from our project management side, where we provide leadership in new spaces. That could be from master plans and design all the way through managing a construction project. So pretty early on, we started having requests from schools on the West Coast and from our clients on the East Coast as COVID was targeting or attacking those parts of the country first. Lots of questions about, hey, are you guys hearing about this? What should we do? Obviously, we were hearing about it, and it seemed like within days of talking to our friends in Seattle and some of our clients in the New England and Manhattan area, within days, this just descended on us. Quickly, we realized there was going to need to be a response. Just as quickly, we realized nobody knew what to do. You know, even the experts all of a sudden weren't experts. We started to see some people get their arms around this. We started to see some people successfully coming up with programs and plans. And so we started reaching out to those folks. And that led to the formation of our Respiratory Health Advisory Council. That council is made up of 13 to 16 people, depending on who we're engaging at the time. But there are people on there from public health, school health officials, design experts, heating, air conditioning, and ventilation designers and engineers, space utilization experts, educators, just healthcare equipment manufacturers, as we learned that we were going to be figuring out how to repurpose things that were designed for a healthcare setting to maybe be functioning in our everyday lives. What we didn't want to have happen was we lock ourselves in a room and declare ourselves experts because we're reading the same things that everybody else was reading. We wanted to go straight to the experts and hear what they had to say. So what came from that was the formation of a program that we called Clean Slate. Dillard, you can move with me. What we learned was that COVID was going to impact schools in 3 dimensions: cleaning and sanitizing, campus operations, and our facilities, obviously. Cleaning and sanitizing, pretty straightforward. We knew that our cleaning protocols were going to be changed. Our focus on containing any type of outbreak was going to hinge around how quickly we could sanitize and disinfect an area. Kevin was instrumental for us in coming up, Kevin Folsom, who's going to be talking to you here in a minute, and coming up with a very well written and thoughtful cleaning and sanitizing protocol that we shared with schools all over the country who didn't know what to tell their staff and didn't know what to tell their outsourced janitorial services companies. What do we want you to do? We saw that our campus operations were going to be impacted. chiefly around social distancing. How do we use our space effectively? Is the space that we need to now deploy that maybe we haven't used in months or years, is it suitable for learning? These changes that we're making and utilizing space and campus redesigns, how far away are they taking us from our master plan? Are we making decisions here that are going to cost us tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to unwind when we do get back to normal? So that was an important area for us to look and advise schools. And the last thing we looked at were campus facilities. We know that our facilities teams are taxed. Back, a year and a half ago, it was setting up and taking down special events and managing carpools and drop-offs and pickups and doing mail runs and still doing their day-to-day work order tasks. So it was important for us to understand what the impact on not just our buildings as we began to deploy and use space differently, but what does that deployment of space, what does that mean to our facilities teams? So we looked at all of this holistically for any school that went through the Clean Slate program, and we compared those schools to peer schools and gave you a report card and said, okay, hey, you're doing better than 78% of schools, and here are the gaps that we found. So rather than a facilities director or a business officer or a board having to research all this myriad of information that was coming out, some of it was really politicized and really charged one way or another. We used our Respiratory Health Advisory Council to create a thoughtful program that enabled us to look at what a school's plan was and identify gaps. It did not take very long for us to realize our new normal was going to be centering around ventilation and indoor air quality, the ability to bring in fresh outside air. We latched onto this pretty early. We were very cautious about endorsing any type of exotic technologies, bipolar ionization, UV light treatments, not because they don't work and not because we're not a fan of them. We were just still learning. About September of last year, ASHRAE, the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers, I may have had those initials out of order, but that's who those guys are. I knew I couldn't do this without notes. Anyway, they finally came out and spoke. They are standard writers when it comes to indoor air quality, ventilation, and our air treatment. And they finally said, hey, look, we wrote a standard in 1972, it's standard 62.1. It was revisited in 2019. And when modeling what we're trying to do to effectively mitigate respiratory-borne diseases and viruses, this standard, this will work. Now, it's something we all have. When you have a new air conditioning system installed and you build a new building, all of our city codes reference standard 62.1. And those mechanisms that support that standard are in place right up until somebody starts to adjust that building for comfort. This is going to be a paradigm shift for all of us. We have designed our air conditioning and ventilation systems with our comfort in mind and very little focus on our health. That's going to change, and we're going to learn how to readjust our building automation systems and to find that balance of what's comfortable, but also we have the right amount of outside air and the right amount of ventilation so that we're diluting any of those respiratory particles that can cause a disease or a virus like COVID. I ask people a lot, when was the last time you were in a hospital and you were comfortable? They don't design those systems for comfort. And we're all going to be living in that world shortly as municipalities pick up on this. We, over the weekend, I just shared with my team research from MIT that says, basically you're just as big a risk 6 feet away from somebody as you are 60 feet away from somebody if you're inside and there's no attention being paid to fresh air intake and ventilation. So on the heels of that, and knowing that all of our schools were asking us, where do we put our money? We want to do the right thing. We're doing temperature checks and we've got plexiglass up around desks and we're separated at lunch and we're eating in our gymnasium and we've created outdoor space, and all of those things are appropriate and we should be doing those, but we keep talking about our new normal. I didn't think like a lot of people, I thought maybe our elevated security at airports would pull back after 9/11. It hasn't. You still can't take food through the thing. We take off our belt. We take off our shoes. We don't bring liquids on the airplanes. It's become our new normal. And I have a 9-year-old who attends an independent school here in the Dallas area who is just as comfortable coming home and telling me about a lockdown drill as we used to be talking about fire drills. That's his new normal in response to school shootings. So the one thing I can tell you is independent schools, we are so impressed and so blessed to get to work with you because of how quickly you move and how effectively you've stepped up to the plate and managed to keep kids in school and keep moving forward and roll with these punches and do what's right. So on the heels of that, this Clean Slate program, we launched Clean Air. And that's really what Kevin is going to be talking about today. It's not so much our program. This is our piece of it. Dylan, I think I'm one ahead of you, man. There we go. So our Clean Air program focuses on the ASHRAE standard 62.1, and it is designed to allow for schools to discover, okay, based on this standard, what condition is our HVAC system in? How close are we to being able to operate up to this standard and provide the best environment possible to mitigate viral spread? So it looks at things like our deferred maintenance, the age of the unit, the amount of filtration you're planning to use, a number of different factors. And then we create a to-do list. Hey, here are 15 things that your school can do right now, very low cost, that will give you healthier indoor air quality. And here is a list of some small capital projects that are going to be required over the next 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years. Here are a list of some major capital projects that are going to be required that maybe we do over the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. We put you on a path so that you begin to create an environment for your students and your staff that is the healthiest it can be, because we're bringing in the right amount of fresh air, we're appropriately ventilated, and we're creating basically what the CDC, the EPA, the WHO, and all these different independent studies now are coming out and saying we should do. The challenge we face, speaking specifically to our audience today, is we all know that there are days in parts of California where clean outside air can be a challenge. And how do we appropriately ventilate our building and bring in this fresh air and accommodate for an outside air quality warning day? That's where we see the deployment of the exotic technologies supporting a program like Clean Air. That's where the expertise of Kevin and his team come in. And I know today, Dylan, you can go ahead and jump. Uh-oh, am I frozen? Oh, okay, here we go. I'm assuming you guys can hear me. Okay. Now my captions are on and I'm distracted watching them go across the board. Okay, here we go. Focus. I'm a trained professional, folks. Don't try this at home. So what did we learn through all of this? We learned that there are some temporary responses to these respiratory health threats. Temperature checks, social distancing, wearing masks. Temperature checks, we certainly understand, are going to be a necessary part of the theater of coming back to school. I think we also acknowledge they are not valuable. We know that people can be completely asymptomatic and be spreading COVID just willy-nilly. So will we continue to do temperature checks? Sure, because I think we all recognize that nobody's coming back to school until mama feels safe dropping the kids off at the curb. And temperature checks help mom feel safe. Just like plexiglass, maybe it makes you feel a little safer that there's a piece of plexi between your student and the next student. Without taking into account without taking into account that those pieces of plexiglass may be impeding the airflow in the room. So we will keep those things up. We anticipated supply chain constraints. We saw that all of our partner schools did a great job anticipating, knowing they would need more cleaning supplies, different cleaning supplies, PPE, masks, gloves. I think most of our schools, for the most part, are out in front of that. Social distancing, we've learned. In fact, I shared with you a minute ago the MIT study that was produced over the weekend. I think we're learning that with masks and the rollout of vaccines, we're becoming a little more comfortable interacting with each other, but certainly don't see social distancing completely going away as it pertains to inside graduations, sporting events, things like that are held indoors. We'll probably still see some of that on the horizon. And I think you'll see masks for the better part of 5 or 10 years scattered throughout people who just have different levels of comfort. I think you'll see them more and more, very similar to if you've ever vacationed in Asia. You know, it's not uncommon at all to see a dozen, half dozen, 50 people on public transportation or in an airport wearing a mask for various reasons. So I think some of these temporary changes we've learned to deal with. And then we look at our permanent changes. And folks, this is where Kevin's going to speak to you today. Where do we put our money? What is going to stick? You know, I feel for people who ran out and bought the thermal imaging temperature readers when they came out. Now that we know that temperature isn't a good litmus test for if you're COVID positive, and we want to make sure that as we advise you moving forward, that we're telling you the things that are going to stick. So what do we see? Indoor air quality, for sure. It is the number one thing that you can do to mitigate the spread of an airborne respiratory health like COVID and like what's coming next. We've got variants. I think the world is hyper-focused now on these respiratory health threats. And you're going to see more and more early notification of, hey, there's this new thing we found in the rainforest and we're worried. And it's going to be better to be ready for it. Touchless fixtures, obviously seen a boom in people installing automatic doors, touchless fixtures in restrooms, in trash areas. We certainly put our stamp and seal of approval on moving to touchless fixtures. And man, remember the book, Everything I Really Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten? How important did washing our hands and covering our mouth when we sneeze and cough? I mean, my goodness, I'll tell you, of all the things that have gone away, coughing in public has gone away. If you cough in public, they're just going to ask you to go walk in traffic. I mean, you can't clear your throat without somebody looking at you. So I think our focus on sanitizing and hygiene is for sure going to be a permanent stick. Dillard, I can see you, but are you moving? There we go. So as I've introduced our company's approach to helping schools navigate this, man, what a generational challenge. Just, this is our time to shine. So we're happy and here to help. I'm going to let Kevin speak on how important this relationship with our financial planning and capital forecasting is going to be, some steps and techniques to help you better prepare for those impacts. Kevin is a 35+ year facilities veteran. Kevin's worked in independent schools. Kevin has worked in higher education. And he is our director of special projects services. He also runs our high performance campus program. And Kevin Folsom, I'm going to turn this floor over to you, and we'll circle back around at the end as we get to the Q&A section.
Great, thanks, Joe. Let me just kind of wrap up a little bit of some technical information. Joe has given us a lot of background and things about the clean air and the requirements of our HVAC systems, but let me just give you a little a highlight here. You'll hear terms outside air, fresh air, and clean air. They all mean the same thing in this world. ASHRAE more often refers to outside air as clean air. And it just so happens our product was named Clean Air before that started happening. But nevertheless, that's why we have this program, is to help bring light to the schools where they have deficiencies there. Clean air is required by law before COVID-19, during, and it will be after. And the caveat being, there are times where you have poor outside air, and then those facilities will have to step up and try to come up with alternative means to try to offset some of that in those rare occasions. The clean air is also part of the assembly of life safety systems. So I'd like to bring attention to that. It's a part of the life safety systems for health and safety, just like fire, elevators, and things of that nature. These components were designed into your HVAC systems to be part of that assembly of life safety systems. One of the problems that we have with this is that no one inspects it like we do the other life safety systems. There are no governing requirements for reporting on whether it's working anymore. If the component on the HVAC system stops working, nobody knows. It absolutely is totally silent. It doesn't shut the oxygen off in your space. You only lose the fresh air dilution that the system is designed, and the system is designed to help with toxins in the facilities and aerosol infectious disease spread. So you could go to any facility that I managed the last 35 years, and I wouldn't be any different shape than any of your schools and the schools that we've evaluated in the past, because it was just never anything of importance. The government didn't force us to keep doing it. And it's expensive. It also is something that goes contrary to energy efficiency. It's not an energy efficiency system. We had one school that removed part of their outside air system. And in order to put the proper outside air back into the system, we had to add 30 tons of HVAC to offset that outside air supply to continue cooling, so it's not too humid or uncomfortable. So this is not an energy efficiency system. This is a life safety system of our HVACs. And it's been in direct competition with energy efficiency, which has been the highest, most pressing issues that we deal with because of its being a cost issue. It's also something that requires automation. It can be pretty complicated. It requires more maintenance. When it breaks, currently, nobody really worries about it, and they just kind of leave it that way until someday they get over there and look at it or find some reason they need to adjust it or put it back together. Let's see, and the other thing is that we have grandfathers. So here's another point that I'd like to make, is that ASHRAE 62.1 has had various revisions. It started in 1972. It's mostly the same today, but they've updated more of how much air is required to change the air in the space. They call air changes. Like in a classroom, you need 6 air changes per hour. So those numbers have changed over time as they have perfected and learned human behavior and needs within a facility. So whenever we evaluate a facility for its compliance to COVID-19, we give credit to if the system is still the way it was when it was originally installed. It's still functioning and it's still the way it was. It's outdated, but it is still providing some outside air benefit. What we're running into though, and then so you kind of ride on grandfathered codes. Most of us have all heard that, and if you've been in the schools long enough, you'll know that that's something that we use quite often to try to keep from spending money on something right now. Codes change and updated because it's something that we as humanity have learned the safest method to do things. So codes are a good thing. But what we're finding during these inspections is that people have actually taken out outside air systems and they are below grandfathered. So that's something that's very concerning to us. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened in some of my schools even too, with the maintenance staff and things of that nature, because I'm not standing over them all the time, or even your contractors could have done it. You know, nobody really pays attention to that kind of thing. So what we're focusing on with our program is predominantly Dillard, you could go to the next slide. So what I want to help you understand is that we're not trying to come up with a new program. We're trying to come up with bringing the program where it needs to be today, based on what we've learned about our codes and the standards that are perfected. Science is behind all of this. And you already have air conditioning systems. So that's the first place you want to spend the money are on the air conditioning systems that you currently have, making sure that they're running properly and properly maintained. One of the most difficult things with preventive maintenance is trying to determine did it really get done. Unless you have someone looking over your shoulders, it's very difficult to prove that. I've had preventive maintenance contractors go through a campus, and a couple of weeks later, a unit would completely fail. We go up there to find out it's completely clogged. It got missed in the preventive maintenance program. Somebody really should be inspecting those things, and it needs to be someone that's not performing the work, an independent person. So that's one of the things that we've tried to make happen and possible, so that schools can bring in an independent person that does not perform maintenance to take a quick look at the maintenance being performed and the basic functionality of the systems. And we're becoming very efficient at that inspection now that we've got numerous campuses done. And I have another assessment that's coming in here probably today that I'll be beginning writing another report for. We treat that report very confidential because of the nature of it. And all schools are going to be this way, but they're afraid to know what, I've had this said from a school that, well, I'm afraid that we'll find out what we don't want to know. That's sort of the way it is with facilities management within schools, is that thought does happen often. So what I want to focus on here now is the financial piece of it. How are we going to come up with the money to bring our systems up to where they need to be? And what our leadership, the first thing that needs to happen is the facilities director and the CFO need to lock arms and see each other very clearly and have a great deal of respect with each other. Facilities, well, an education institution is built on major pillars. And you have faculty and staff, the program, you have leadership, vision casting, and all of that. And the third major pillar is facilities. Nothing happens in education without the facilities. Everything is tied to that. If you want IT, you're not going to have IT without roof, electricity, air conditioning, fire systems, fire suppression, and all of that. So everything literally revolves around facilities. And we have to make a renewed commitment to putting that into our portfolio. If we're charging tuition and facilities is part of that tuition, then we need to find out how much do we need to be setting aside for facilities to continue that moving forward. Okay, Dillard, next slide. Let's see here. Lost my notes here. Okay, well, I'll wing it. Okay, so what I want to point out is that if you have, for example, on the funding piece, there are metrics scientifically proven what it takes to financially keep a facility in full operation, code compliant, and in like new condition. It's not, and APA has spent decades perfecting this particular formula of how to use it as a basis. APA is an association of higher education facility officers. They also provide attendance or a membership to independent K through 12s, which I was a member of when I was with a school. And the exact number, or sort of the overarching number to go by, is if you have $80 million worth of facilities at your site, 2.5% of that should be set aside every year for planned renewal. 1.5% should be spent on maintenance. This is not janitorial, it's not event setup, this is just maintenance of the facilities. You're literally rebuilding the facilities over the life of it. And the cost of those activities go up with inflation. It follows that whole process. So you have $80 million worth of facilities. $2.8 million essentially is what should be allocated for facility preservation. That's, you know, looking at the $80 million asset, that's a pretty small amount, but a campus with $80 million in facilities probably has gross institutional expenditures of around 30 million, 35 million. So the percentage of that is looking more like 8% of the overall gross institutional expenditures. Still, 8% is a pretty small number when you consider what you get from your facilities and what the facilities does for your institution. So I want to draw light to that piece there, that there is a way to do this, and you just have to have the proper funding set aside and ready for your facility preservation. Another analogy that we like to use in the facilities world is the goose that lays the golden eggs. So the farmer had a goose who laid golden eggs. He would feed the goose and keep it healthy, and it was laying golden eggs. And then he started becoming greedy, and he wanted more golden eggs. So he was pressuring the goose to lay more golden eggs, lay more golden eggs. And in a sense, that's what we're doing with our facilities, is we're pressuring our facilities to get more out of it for less money. More for less, more for less, more for less. And we also use comparisons with other schools. We have a significant systemic problem in the United States with our education facilities being used as what I call a bank. We're taking money out of the facilities and using it for operation needs throughout the campus or something of that nature. And so the facilities is doing more and more for less. And then at the end of the goose story is that the farmer becomes so impatient that he reaches in, cuts the goose open and reaches in and pulls out the golden egg. Well, that's kind of the end of it all. Now that I'm with a company I'm able to see across the country, various schools and things of that nature, there are schools that go out of business because of deferred maintenance. It is a reality that you have to keep in mind. If you're not taking that 2.8 million, or let's say that 2.8 million is too much money, okay, 1.5 million. Just come up with a number that you stick to every year, and you put the money back in there. The reality is schools typically spend around 3% of their gross institutional expenditures on this cause. Far too low. And most of the time, those expenditures are only in emergency cases. It failed. We're all scrambling. We're trying to get this thing built back and put back together. Very seldom is it being proactively used in facility renewal. So what we're focusing on, so in light of that, what we're focusing on, Dillard, you can go to the next slide. So now here we are focusing on the fight against COVID-19. And Joe, I realize you probably had something you wanted to say on this slide too, because this was your idea. Cute Star Wars with the COVID germ out there. So what we're focused on with our clean air assessment is spending the money you should already be spending on your facilities. This isn't anything new. This is making your facilities function properly because it's scientifically proven that's minimally what you need. If you want to go above that, then you would get into these exotic features of bipolar and UVC and that kind of thing. But those are technologies above and beyond, and they're designed to work with HVAC systems that are 62.1 compliant. So keep that in mind, that if you're using that without having compliant HVAC systems, you really don't have a system functioning the way it's supposed to be. So everything is the foundation is that 62.1 and trying to get as close to the 2019 version as you possibly can. So once we've done an assessment, we give the school a set of priorities, because it may take multiple years to be able to recover from this, to bring these things back up to speed. We'll give them a list of all the maintenance issues that are deficient, because it's just not something that's been put mind to as far as it relates to the 62.1 outside air issue. And then we give them a strategy for multi-years of how to bring those systems up to speed, but also tying into their natural replacement cycle. So if you have a unit that's 25 years old, well, you don't really want to modify that. You need to plan for replacing that unit and then replacing it with the proper controls. If you replace a unit today and you pull a permit, you will have 2019 ASHRAE 62.1 compliance. Joe, did you have anything on this slide you wanted to pick up on?
I do want to say that is the coolest slide I have ever seen in my life. Whoever came up with this is a genius.
Yeah, is that supposed to be like the Death Star?
Yeah, right. No, Kevin, I covered more than I should have at the beginning. I want to make sure we have room for questions. So why don't you keep moving and we'll pick it up at the end if that's okay.
Okay. Dillard, let's go to the next slide. I can. Do we have until 1:45 our time?
Yeah, we're gonna try to wrap up about 1:30, as close to as we can, so we can leave some room for questions.
Okay. So I mentioned earlier that the communication between the facilities director and the CFO should be very close to one another. One of the things the CFO can relate to a facilities audit that the facilities director needs for that reinvestment of its facilities is what's called a facilities audit. Now, CFOs have a very similar system they call a financial audit, and it's usually evaluation of the 30 million gross institutional expenditures, how those are being spent. Is it everything ethical and being done properly and most sustainable method for the institution and all of that? An $80 million physical plant needs that same assessment every year. It needs to be evaluated. You have to crunch the numbers. You have to make sure everything is tracking the way it needs to be. Because if you have deferred maintenance that's accruing, you're literally accruing a debt in finances. Those deferred maintenance components will never go away. You will have to replace those components. So you're as that is building, you're creating a debt of something that you're going to have to financially support. The that $2.8 million number I used for an $80 million plant, if you can spend less, and you're increasing your risk if you spend less. So essentially look at it as it's either 2.8 million or I'm going to do 1.5 million, and then I'll just take my chances on the other 1.3 million. Well, essentially you're incurring a $1.3 million debt on the end. Somehow, so that's going to have to be made up. And most of the time, schools do it through fundraising, or a new building program, and they'll get all the donors to come back and try to do that thing. So that's the part there that how they deal with that. So the facilities director does have a very important job. Well, most people don't really realize that or look at it that way, but they do have a significant impact to that. Next slide. So the CFO has very deep understanding of a lot of things. The facilities director has equally deep understanding of all the things that relate to their areas. They have to mutually respect one another for that depth of what they understand. And the facilities manager, when he's asking for things, for new AC units or new flooring and all that, very often, what I usually encounter with that is if I'm giving funds to do that, it's treated like, well, here you go. I just gave you a raise. I gave you all this money to go replace all these things. That's not what we were after. We're trying to help the school be better. And the reality is to be able to get the money to do all of those projects now just has increased our workload tremendously. But it's what we want to do to be able to help the school. It's not really a bonus that we're getting, that facilities managers are getting. So look at it that way. That to help your facilities manager, they have a great deal of wisdom about the facilities and what things are going to last and probably not going to last if we don't put some money into that. Next slide. Another perspective is you have moving from an overhead perspective to an asset perspective. So overhead is They're always trying to reduce that overhead, keep it down as low as possible, but we really need to be looking at it as an asset perspective. It's something that requires a lot of attention and devotion, just like a faculty salary. It's not something, you can't keep the same faculty and say, well, we're just not going to pay them we're only going to pay them half this year. No, you have to pay the whole amount. It's the same with facilities. The money is not going into your people, your facilities people. The money is going into the facilities, and it needs to be treated just like a salary. You have to continually renew your facilities in a manner very much like that. Next slide. Facilities people have a difficult time with this. They want to educate about neglect, and COVID-19 or the clean air policy could be this way too. Things are functioning, but it's very difficult for a facilities manager to bring bad news to a leadership that's going to have to spend money. It's a very difficult challenge to do. The tendency is a facilities manager who doesn't want to say anything because they're going to get scrutinized and looked at as if they're not doing their jobs or something of that nature. But everything in facilities requires money to be able to be maintained. So it's very important that we become very attuned to what is being neglected on the campus. And the neglect is most times, 95% of the time, is the lack of funds. We will use comparison of other schools. I mentioned earlier that this is a significant systemic problem in the United States in our education facilities of this financial model not being followed. We have, and the way we try to work our way around that is we'll do comparisons of other schools. You have to realize that you're comparing to the same problem. You're not really comparing to where we need to be. So when you're comparing to other schools, you're comparing to another school that's probably doing just as poorly as our schools have done, or the schools that I've been part of. So it's something that we have to continue to educate and work through. Next, please. And so with the facilities assessment, especially relating to this clean air assessment, is to give you, to be able to make intelligent decisions about your priorities and where to best spend your money today. Even if you started setting, if you have an older campus, if you started setting aside 2.8 million just for the preservation of your facilities, it's too late. You should have started that 20 years ago so that you have a slush fund of funds to be able to do large scale updating and things of that nature. Nevertheless, those amount of funds can allow you to start attacking things immediately. And clean air would be one of those that we would highly recommend. Next. Okay, I made it, Joe. 128.
Impressive.
Very impressive. You guys must have rehearsed a million times. It was on the point. I really appreciate that. So we'd like to go ahead and open it up for Q&A. Please feel free to unmute yourself. We'd like this to be as interactive as we can make it. So we'd love to accept your questions now. And just a reminder, all of the sessions will be recorded and we will have copies of all the slide decks. So once I am able to collect all of the materials for the entire conference, I'll post it up on our website and let everybody know once that's ready. Any questions? Oh, let me go. This looks like we have a question here. Yes, Susie, fire away with your question.
Hi, thanks so much. And thanks for a great presentation. I'd like to know, we are just now outsourcing our facilities for the first time since the school began. And while we just had our second building reserve study, our new outsourced facilities company will be maintaining our HVAC. And I'm mindful of what you said about don't have the people that are monitoring it, they'll be changing our filters and keeping the basic upkeep. Don't have them be the same people that are looking at the system. So in the case of outsourcing, all of facilities, would you recommend that we bring in yet another vendor and we did just have our HVAC looked at by a different engineering company. Would you recommend that once a year, even with outsourcing our facilities, that we bring in somebody to check their work?
Unfortunately, that's where we are today. You can get cost effective with that kind of thing if you make it where it's just an annual type inspection, such as one program that we use, we call the High Performing Campus. We do an inspection of the campus every year. And really, when you look at it, and then we have touch points with the campus throughout the year, kind of getting ideas, how are things tracking. And in a situation like that, we can talk to your contractor and your CFO, or you, if that's you, and then we can talk together, and we can probe and ask questions and things of that nature. The cost of something like that I've found to be, probably around the range of a part-time person. So I think it would be very wise to have someone that you can get cost effectively that understands and knows your school. And that's what we strive to do, is we try to maintain that contact with the school so that we know it, we understand it, and we're asking the questions, and we're advising, and we're sending out alarms when we see problems that could be potentially disastrous on the other side.
Susan, one thing I might take advantage of your question and point out to the group, as we are circling the wagons on these presentations around COVID specifically, because it's around us everywhere. As it pertains to your air conditioning inspection, this is going to be, we're identifying probably a paradigm shift for air conditioning contractors. You're going to have a generation of HVAC contractors who have not been exposed to standard 62.1 outside of the setting of new construction. And it's not a bait and switch. Your air conditioning contractors have not put you on a hustle. When they come out and do your annual checkups on your units, the fact that they're not using the standard 62.1, it's not because they're doing something wrong. It's because, like Kevin touched on, those issues get grandfathered in because they're costly, and eventually that becomes something that's just not checked. Your air conditioning guys are listening for, whirls and clanks and clinks, and they're feeling for vibrations and stutters, and they're checking fans and belts. They're not looking at it from an efficiency standpoint as it pertains to how am I maintaining a healthy environment. This is something very new. So even more important over the next foreseeable few years, as we're battling COVID and its variants, is going to be, yes, have a firm come in who has a program in place designed and referenced off of that 62.1 standard, so that not only are we knowing that, yes, our air conditioners are running and functioning and they're going to get us through the hot time of the year, but also we're able to provide a safe and clean environment. And that is not going to be something that an air conditioning servicing company can do right now. Everybody's going to get pulled into this, but right now this is going to be a step up. This is going to be a consultative level investigation.
Thanks very much for that. Is there going to be a listing through Cal-ISBOA of recommended vendors to look at following ASHRAE's 62.1, or do we need to go to the ASHRAE site?
I'm happy to recommend one company. We obviously do that, but Kevin, I think ASHRAE would have information on it. I don't know that they would have links to people doing it, but Susan, I'll put Kevin's information into the chat, and if you want to reach out to him, I don't think you would find that the investigation is there's no cost stumbling points. It's pretty straightforward.
Thanks so much. It's on the slide, and I meant no offense. I'm just unclear whether Building Solutions is a company that actually is doing the regular maintenance or on HVAC systems, or just coming in and assessing what needs to be done.
Correct. We come in and do assessments, not specifically to HVAC, certainly clean air centers around air conditioners, but yeah, our facility audit would be an assessment of the entire facilities department with deferred maintenance, capital forecasts,
ADA.
Yeah, correct. And then the clean air program is exactly what you're asking, Susan. It is, we take the standard 62.1, we run all of your heating, air conditioning, and ventilation systems through an investigation using that as our guidepost. And we establish some low-hanging fruit, immediate things that a school can do to mitigate viral spread and create healthy indoor air. Then we give you a list of small capital projects that maybe you can tackle with funds you have. And then also understanding that some of these systems are just not going to be able to produce the level of clean air required. They may be larger capital projects. So what we do is we create an immediate plan, a next step, and then a roadmap to get all the way to compliance with 62.1. And it's coming. It's getting closer and closer to regulators stepping in and saying, okay, everybody has this long to get compliant with this standard or a standard based on 62.1. You can see all the research pointing that way. So we've tried to devise something that's entry level, accessible. We also include a marketing piece, a letter that you can send out to your students, staff, families, employees, teachers, and let everybody know, hey, you can't see this like you can see thermometers and all these other types of technology, but this is, according to the CDC, EPA, ASHRAE, WHO, this is the best thing we can do to keep us all safe. We've partnered with Building Solutions. Building Solutions is supported by this Respiratory Health Advisory Council that is a nationwide council where, we have representation from all over the country on that council in all different disciplines, so that everybody can feel supported and safe. And we sort of outline the steps that you're taking as an institution through the Clean Air program so that people can feel confident and comfortable being on campus.
Any further questions? Okay, well, I don't want to keep everyone if there are no further questions. Again, this session will be recorded and I will send out a copy of the slides and all that good stuff once I've collected everything for the conference. So if there are no further questions, I would like to thank the Building Solutions team today for putting together a fantastic presentation and for being with us here today. And we have closing remarks starting at 11:45 if you'd like to hop into that session, and then that will be it for today. The conference will resume tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.